I ran my business for years and thought I was doing really good, but I was lucky at the end of the month if I had, $50 in the account after everybody was paid. And once I got to that point where, I had 20 grand or more in the bank all the time, I didn't need this check to pay this guy or to do this, to do that. I could operate. And then when I was out doing estimates, I didn't need that job to make my car payment or make my mortgage payment or pay my employer or employees or pay, the material bill. You start bidding them differently too.
Hey, Wood Floor Pros, Wood Floor Business Editor Kim Walgren here. This is part 2 of our episode with lifelong Wood Floor Pro, Tom Wimberly. If you haven't heard part 1 yet, I highly recommend you back up and listen to part 1 first. If you've heard part 1, let's jump right back into our conversation with Tom.
I find most of my customers will run dust containment on anything. They're not doing the big machine. It'll pick up the 80s and the 100s. It doesn't pick up the 36 grit. And it seems like the bag works perfectly fine. I find most of them will run bag on big machine and everything else gets dust containment.
The biggest thing we did with our bags was at the end of every job, they got turned inside out and shook, out in the neighborhood.
Absolutely, yeah. Into the woods where it belongs.
Didn't look good, but, a little dust in the street. But for one, I don't want them catching fire in my trailer. But the other is to keep them from, being able to breathe. If you use the same bag every day and you just dump it, it's not breathing. It's gotten clogged.
Right.
You need to turn it inside out and give it a good shaking. And never wash them because it ruins the fibers and the way they're designed to breathe. Some guys think, "Oh yeah, I wash my bags." It's not a good thing.
No, not. So let's run through them. We'll go through each of the particular machines that the guys use, and let's just stick with it. Let's start with the big machine. I don't see as many drum sanders today. I see them, I fix them, they work great. I think guys are used to the fact that they're not that much trouble because when you switch over to let's say a Galaxy or a Hummel or a Cobra 1 or 2, now you're talking about a belt sander that operates like a drum sander, but you got to keep that upper roller assembly maintained.
Yeah.
Right? Because what's the big killer of big machines, you think?
Like when you're bringing up drum sanders, everybody thinks they chatter. They don't chatter if they're set up right and you put the paper on right. I learned on a 12-inch machine when I was, 15 years old, and my first machine was a 12-inch American, and that thing never chattered.
Right.
The belts. The only reason I switched personally from a split drum to a belt machine was because the belt machines pick the dust up better. Like you're saying, with a good bag on a belt machine, you don't need to run a vacuum. You can put a vacuum on a split drum and it's still not going to pick up the dust. They're high up off the floor, and you can just watch the dust shoot out the front of it as it's eating the floor.
Exactly. Well, I think sometimes too, the guys will push the maintenance on it and the split drum gets worn out, and then you got to set it left, right. Sometimes it's too high on the right, too high on the left, too high opposite, too high. And then the best part, we used to love this when we first do this, is you're camming in that split drum on like a 36 grit paper, and you hear the new kid in the other room, and you hear tick, 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 and you'd be like, "Oh, here it comes, man!" Boom! It explodes. Now you got grit everywhere. You got to vacuum the house. They didn't hear the paper been torqued so many times it was going to rip and explode. You don't get that, with a belt.
No. Well, and two is like, if your paper blows on a split drum, first thing you do is shut the machine off and put the drum on the ground.
Yeah.
So longer it's sitting there spinning, if that 36 is wrapped up in there and on the foam, it's going to take put a big groove in it, in a few seconds.
I think now today we just see so much. When I got my first machine, I couldn't afford belts, so we went with drum, but the belts got less expensive. They're made super well. They're all cloth back and everything. And now you got aluminum oxide, and you got all these different ones that work out well. But now you got the complexity of the upper roller assembly, and that seems to be where a lot of things start to cause problems. They get full of dust. They get compacted. The drums aren't dropping the heads deep enough. There's a lot that can go on with that, right? It goes back to your idea of cleaning the damn machine out.
Yeah, cleaning it out and I mean, I guess somebody's got to do those nasty refinishes, but I always bid them so high in case I had to do repairs just because of that one job. I mean, if you're doing a couple thousand feet and it's, old gum, varnish or old Fabulon, and stuff like that, where it just gums up your paper. It's getting on your wheels. It's getting on your upper roller. It gets behind the belt. It's getting on your drum even. It's just, to me, it's not worth it, but I guess somebody's got to do those jobs.
Somebody, I train my guys here, and I'll do this all the time. We're really busy on something, and someone will call and go, my machine was running great all week long, and now it's a mess, or it's tracking off. And I always yell at them. I go, "Did you sand a pine job today?"
Yeah.
Yeah. How'd you know? Tell them what? Why would I ask that?
It's because of the sap in the wood, the fibers of the dust stick to everything.
Everything.
It's almost like static electricity. It just sticks to everything.
And then it gets under the belt, it sticks to the roller. And then sometimes these guys, they have so much ground up metal in their roller from everything else they've damaged that now the pine's sticking to that, and they go, it's surfing left, surfing right. And this is my favorite one, right? What do? They track the belt either right out the door it'll cut through the door in the shape of the belt, or they'll go the other way, right? And track right through the bolts on the upper arm assembly. It'll cut them right off.
So then when their wheels get caked with that stuff, they'll take their flooring scraper and scrape the wheels. And then they take chunks out of the material of the wheels. And now the wheel isn't round.
Right.
And that's where you'll start getting waves from, because your rear wheel is shaped like an egg, and you don't realize it doesn't take much, So when I get machines in, if they're saying that they're having waves, I always flip the machine over, I use a dial indicator, and I spin the wheels slowly and just see, if they're how much out of round they are. If it's 3 or 4 thousandths, it's not a big deal, but you get one that are 10, 12, 15 thousandths out of round, that's going to cause a wave, especially on the back wheel.
Sure. How do you know when you're supposed to replace a drum? Whether it's a belt or a drum, there's a drum on there. Some of these guys, I saw one the other day that should have been replaced 2 years ago. What's the answer to that? When should you be replacing those drums?
So the ribs in them kind of give you, it's like the depth on a tire tread. You can kind of tell how worn it's getting by the cooling ribs that are in it. See, I'm different because these machines make me money. So like an edger, I'll put a new pad on an edger once a year, need it or not. The drums are a little more expensive, but if you're charging properly and getting a good price per square foot, there's no reason every 2 to 3 to, depending on the type of work you're doing. If you're doing nasty old refinishes, you're going to change it sooner. The biggest thing with the drum is heat too. So if you run your paper, you try to push your paper too much, it's going to create more heat. It's going to break down the rubber, the composite of the drum sooner. They don't last. Some guys that, mine's 20 years old. They don't last that long, and it's not worth it to even try to push them that far, I don't think. The time it takes to refinish one house because your machine's not running properly, the money you lose doing that, it's not worth. You could change the wheels, you could change the drum, and not have to have that happen.
The biggest thing I learned, it was a big mistake too. Early on, I would rebuild Cobra 1s, Cobra 2s, Hummels, everything. And I would take the entire upper roller assembly apart, and I'd use like WD-40 or whatever on the lifting mechanism. Oh, it ran beautifully. And after about 3 days, guys would call and go, this is all seized up. And I call the factory. They're like, you don't ever lube a roller assembly because the dust is so fine, it'll cling to it, then heat up, and then it really turns to glue, right? Bad idea. What do you do to keep that running smooth? Do you use a dry lubrication or just nothing on those things?
Not really nothing on them. Just keep them clean. All the bearings are sealed, as long as they're, again, change them every few years, they don't have to be changed all the time. But if you have a machine that's 8 or 9 years old and you've never had your bearings in your upper roller changed, or the bearings in the guide rollers, or, even the bearings in the drum, it won't hurt to have them done. It's just preventative maintenance. Anytime you add any type of lubricant to it, I've even tried dry lubes, and I've noticed that they do collect dust too. It just gives you something for the dust to form on. If they're graphite based or a lithium based dry lube, I've actually seen them start collecting dust too over time. So best thing is just clean and keep them clean. Just blow it out, keep it clean.
Gotcha. I need your opinion on this one. It's just an opinion. A lot of times I'll see the newer big machines come in and they're running 30 amp connectors, twist lock connectors, and then Some of the older Hummels are all 20, and a lot of people change them over to 30s just so their chords will match. Is that a problem? Is that a big deal, or is that okay?
No, the metal in the plug is the same whether it's a 20 or a 30.
Okay.
It's mainly like if you had an outlet and the outlet is 50 amps or it's 30 amps, it's just to keep you from not overloading that circuit. You know, I've had, working on people's equipment. I would hate to have every machine a different plug. It's nice to be able to have your, all your plugs matching. So your Hummel and your, if you got a, trio or, some type of planetary that's 220 is to have them all have the same plug, just the convenience then,
All right, moving on. Edgers. And, a lot of times I think we're talking about American B2s, 7Rs, old spinners and whippets and stuff. There's other different edgers and things, but what do you think in all of them is the most overlooked part of maintenance on an edger?
The pad.
Oh, good. Question.
So
what's
guys,
your opinion on this? The factory pad or the universal? We use them all, but is one terrifically better than another, or do they both work?
They both work. The factory pads, I prefer them personally.
Okay.
Years ago, they used to only be, $50, $60. So yeah, but change it once a year, who cares? Now they're a little bit over, they're like $109 for a Super 7 pad for a factory one. Okay. The biggest thing is guys, hitting nails and staples. Usually what I see is the front quarter inch of the rubber is gone on the pad, and then it's not getting up to the wall anymore. And that's from running it, on fireplace mantles or, whatever, and, just wearing it down. Once it's worn down like that, you might as well just replace it. It could be, quarter-inch thick rubber everywhere else. It's all good. But if you don't have it cutting on the nose when you need to get up to something, it's I know from sanding, it's a pain in the ass then, because then how do you got to scrape that or use a different machine or, one thing, if it's possible, if you have the capabilities, keep one edger for roughing and doing all the crappy work and keep one edger just for doing your final cuts, and never use that nice one for the shit work, because if you damage the pad, then you always have your other one to clean it up and go behind the other one.
Well, I've seen people put accessory pads like felt pads, et cetera, which is, it's iffy because then you start cutting into the baseboard and that causes complaints.
Well, or the guys that stack, 4 papers on there and rip them off as they go along because it takes so long to change a piece of paper. Those are the ones that aggravate me. So when I put a new pad on an edger, I got to set the wheels to the factory setting, and I got to dress the pad to keep it from bouncing or hopping. These guys that run the felt pads, you can't really set an edger up for that, because those pads wear. It's hard. It makes it hard. I do have a way of doing it, but it's a pain in my ass, So when they come in and I can see that the wheels are jacked way up and they use the felt pad, I'm like, oh man.
I'll set a B2 up, nickel and a dime left, right to get it. And then, and then I'll do the old 3 penny in the middle on a 7R. And then I got a guy came in the other day with a half an inch worth of padding. I go, these discs, you have 8 different grits. He goes, oh yeah, well the wheels weren't quite right. I just keep leaving the pad on there. I'm thinking, how am I supposed to adjust this and get it if you're throwing on a half inch of padding on these things?
Right.
You never know what people are going to come up with.
So I got a board and I glued another piece of wood on there, the thickness of the felt pads that a lot of these guys use, the maroon or the white pads. And this way I can set the wheels and dress it for the thickness of what they should be using. But there's still no guarantee that's going to cut at 1 o'clock or wherever they want to cut it, because with them pads, there's a lot of inconsistencies. But what I find is most of the guys that use them pads, they don't really know what they're doing. Personally.
Yeah, you should be able to get it down to 1 sheet and cut fairly
one
flat,
sheet of paper.
clean. Yeah. Well, do you think should these guys know how to be able to throw a pair of brushes in their machine?
Some of them, yeah. I mean, some guys have, some people have, basic common sense, and some don't.
Yeah.
I did one the other day, and the spring clip was in the machine and got caught between the field and the armature.
Yeah.
Because the guy tried to do his brushes himself. And then the other thing too, these distributors, they'll sell brushes like for the Super 7 that are square in the back. So they put the spring clip in there, and then the spring goes around the brush and holds it and actually pinches it and keeps it away from the armature. There's a reason that the factory brushes have that little slant in the back. It's where that spring clip sits in there, and that spring puts the right tension on that brush and stays in place all the time.
Right.
A lot of these edgers that I get in here that have bad armatures in them is because the guys bought the shitty brushes from the distributor, put them in themselves, and then it failed because only one or two were making contact. So as it's it's not getting the right arc, and it starts eating away at the armature. But it keeps us busy, keeps us
right. It's built into obsolescence, and it works for us.
They want to do it themselves. It keeps us busy sometimes. I mean, but if a guy knows how to do it, like I said, there's videos out there. Wayne Lee's got a bunch of them, and a lot of these companies do. If you're going to change your brushes on yourself, watch a video or two. Take a couple minutes.
Yeah, I've seen Daniel Boone's. I've seen Wayne Lee's. They're really good. Yeah, that stuff's especially because it's industry specific. These are guys that are working with the exact machine that we're talking about. These machines haven't really changed in 3 or 4 or 5 decades, so it's good to know how they work exactly. You know what? I find the number one thing, and you'll know this. What's the number one number one problem when people go, I just can't get my paper tight on my edger?
Yeah, it's just it's real common with the Super 7 that the guys that use the paper that's got a 5/16 hole in it.
Yep.
So every time they stick if they turn their edger upside down and they push the screw, the bolt through the paper, they're knocking the grit off the center of that paper into the hole.
Sometimes the actual hole punched the chip.
Yeah, and then they'll crank it down and keep compacting that. I remember when I was young, I'd take a little flathead screwdriver, turn the edger on
while it was running.
Yeah, really stupid.
I did that
do
too.
That now.
I just stopped doing that.
But when we were young, when I was young and not too bright, I remember doing that a lot of times. That's how I'd clean it out. Flip it over, turn it on, and jam a screwdriver in there. And lucky it never flew out and stuck in me or the wall.
I've had people go, hey, I can't, what is wrong with the screwdriver? I can't use it because it's not a screwdriver. It's for cleaning out the edger hole. And these guys will pop that. They'll keep pushing those little chips. That's what I was telling you. The guy that was in the other day with the 1/2 inch of padding. When I looked, every one of those little punch outs was stuck in there. And I looked in there and I showed it to him and he goes, oh, that's my kid. He goes, I know it. So I drilled it all out and cleaned it. And boy, went right back to being normal again.
So here in the shop, what I use is I got a small punch, and I've taken it on the grinder and made it a little chisel.
Okay.
So because some of that stuff's packed in there so hard, and then I just sit there and little hammer and tap into that stuff, break it up, and then blow it out, and just keep doing that. And then once I get it all out, I take a bottom thread tap and run it through there, and just clean the threads out by retapping it, just so the customer won't have a problem in the future. And then I warn them, just blow it out every once in a while again. Just blowing things out makes a big difference.
It sounds like the edger, that's a good one because you don't even have to take it apart. The whole crown is open. You can get in there with it's not going to harm it if you get in there with 120 PSI on a
blow. No, you can use your compressor on, no problem. That ain't going to hurt anything. There's no bearings there. There's no seals in there. It's just a dead end hole.
Hey, how do you know when there's not enough grease in the lower housing? Like some people just ignore
screaming and screaming and vibrating,
hopping all over the place. I did make a mistake years ago. I put too much in. I didn't know there was a little bleeder hole, and it's just pissing grease all over the place.
Well, the thing I always do is when I'm working on them is make sure that breather hole's actually breathing.
Yeah.
A lot of the edgers, all the years of it seeping out and then dust getting collected on there, it's completely packed. So then when it heats up and that grease needs to expand and go somewhere, it'll come out the bottom seal, around into the fan assembly and stuff, down in the bottom.
Oh, hell yeah. All right, we're moving on because this is my favorite one. Not the glamour of the other machines we talked about, but the buffer is an easy one to mess up. What do you think the most common mistake is people make with their floor buffers?
Yeah, the most repairs I got in here for buffers are the cords being yanked out of them.
Yep.
The strain relief in the handle. I don't know if guys, one guy's running it and the other guy's standing on the cord, or he's got it, around 3 corners of the cabinets and then keeps going. I don't know why, that machine seems to get the cord ripped out of it more. but that's usually about it. Buffers, again, the buffers that are open motors, that use a fan to cool them.
Yep.
That aren't a sealed unit motor, the dust gets in there and it just clogs on the windings, and then they heat up, and then it ruins them. They can't cool properly.
The biggest thing I see is the damn switches go, and this is really funny because it's with a 2-man crew. This is the job. I'll hold the buffer and you plug it in for me, right?
Yeah.
How come? Well, the switch stopped working a long time ago. I've seen guys that didn't know that. They plug it in. I've seen the buffer right around and the handle go right through a wall.
I worked for a guy whose buffer was like that, when I was a teenager, and I ended up getting aggravated the one day because it wouldn't always stick, but it would stick occasionally. And, I told him, order the parts and I'll fix it, but he wouldn't do it. And then back then, the replacement plug on the end, was bad, and somebody put a plug on there. So it had a metal plug, talking in the 80s, big metal plug on the end. Well, it's not shutting off, and I'm grabbing the cord and I'm yanking it out of the wall, and I give it a yank and it flies across the room and went through a window on the other side. And all that could have been prevented if you would just bought the damn switch so I could replace it.
Right. Isn't that something, man? And by the way, the buffer's a beast.
He wanted me to pay for the window. I'm like, screw you.
Yeah, that ain't gonna happen.
It's your equipment.
So, yeah. Well, then you get into the dust containment equipment. It's still part of what we talked about with vacuums. But have you ever seen? Let me ask you this: you ever seen the Bona? What was it? With the glass container? Was it Bona something vac? And it had like the canister was. Yeah, the DCS, but the clear one, you could see through it, right?
Yeah, the early one, yeah.
Right, and then it had this really kind of intricate, like $500 upper filter, and it was like a metal. Yeah. Well, we had a guy bring it in. This guy was not a floor guy. He was a carpet tile guy, and his father-in-law bought him $50,000 worth of beautiful Bono equipment to go out and do floors. Not only did it fail miserably because he didn't know what he was doing, but when he brought the vacuum in, it smelled burnt. And that's not a good thing. So I took the lid off, and I couldn't find the filter, and I knew I was in the right place. I didn't realize he had never, ever in a year and a half, ever cleaned the filter out. It was so permanently packed that it had begun to char and burn, and it had almost become like concrete. We had to chisel that out and then clean. It basically destroyed the filter head. Never once thought to clean the thing out?
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
That's why I was talking about that Cab 26 I had. Like I said, once a year I would take the head apart and blow out the inside of the head where dust really shouldn't be getting, but it does.
Yeah. Well, backpack vacs, you got to be very careful. They have a small containment area, and we know polydust causes fires. Then there's containment vacs that have. You do this for me because you know what you're talking about. What is the difference between someone that puts a rigid shop vac or a Milwaukee shop vac and they hook it up to their sander and actual dust containment?
Night and day, really.
It is.
Yeah, I mean, so I running my business, I subbed out work when I got too busy, and I subbed it out usually to guys who worked for me at one time and then went out on their own. And I gave a job to a guy, and the customer was wanting us to cover the cabinets with plastic and worrying about, they put tape over the outlets. I mean, like there's dust going to get inside your outlet. I just, okay, whatever. But I told him, I said, it doesn't matter. Everything we run, we hook up to vacuums, and I assured them. And then they went out of town, for the week that we're doing the floor. And I had a guy that used to work for me start the job because we were busy on another job. So I just told him, just get in there and do the rough sanding. Well, he had a rigid vacuum, and because he was too cheap to buy bags for it, he would tie a big machine bag inside the rigid vacuum.
Right.
And he swore that worked better. I come in there, and from the front, I open the front door, and he's, doing around the kitchen cabinets, and I could see the dust coming out of the kitchen. It was just blowing straight through the vacuum. I mean, it wasn't, none of the dust was keeping in the vacuum.
It's just begging for a fire, right?
Yeah, and it got worse from there. So
Hey, help me with this one. I got a guy, he's thrown me this for years. So take a protein backpack vac. We sell tons of them. This is the most popular one that we sell. And you take the top off, and what you do is you put in what we call the bean cloth filter. We always call it Abe Lincoln's hat, right? It looks like Abe Lincoln's stone by it. And then you put your paper insert bag, and then you put the lid and you vacuum. I got a guy that puts in the paper and then the Abe Lincoln hat, and he swears it works better. Does that even sound like it would work to you?
No, because that what you're calling the Abe Lincoln hat,
Cloth filter.
there's some stuff's going to get packed into the material of that bag. It's not going to be able to breathe.
Correct.
I've seen guys run them without the paper bag, thought that the other one was the only filter you need, and burn up the motor. The Abe Lincoln hat was the only one they used. I've seen that a few times.
I had a guy, we were working a big project. I had 22 guys. We had 60,000 feet to do. And every Friday, if we hit a certain number, I'd buy lunch for everybody. And this one kid, they couldn't find him. And I go, I think he's up on the 4th. I'll go find him. And I can hear an edger. Barely. And I get up to the 4th floor. I still can barely hear this edger. I open the closet. He's in the closet, sitting on a drywall bucket, running a B2 with one hand, smoking a cigarette with no bag. It's just throwing stuff. Just flying everywhere. I don't know where he came up with that idea. And probably no mask. So I've seen guys cut holes in their masks so they can smoke.
Well, back before the, vacuum age, because I've been doing this for so long, all we ever ran with B2s. That's with my grandfather, and that's why I learned on. I was really a strict B2 guy. And B2s do not pick up dust very well. So what I used to do was take the big machine bag and tie it onto the B2. Okay. This way, there was more volume in that bag for that air to go, and then it would pick up the dust better. Right. And I would still empty my bag after every room, though, because that was just how I was. If the bag's that big, it's dragging on the floor, it's going to get holes in it quicker. Sure. Some guys that saw me doing that, they would do it, and then they would, try to do the whole house on one bag, and it didn't work that way. But
I see a problem with edgers a lot lately, and I think it comes from maintenance. Is they come in and they say, "Oh, well, it's leaving the washer's leaving marks," and I find that they don't actually set. There's the extra set screws on the 7R and the B2 on the back. Once you have your machine set, you dial them in. So when you're bouncing it up and down, you don't knock the wheels out of square, and they never set them. So as they're going along, they don't know the back wheels are dropping, and then boom, now they're getting the back end of the machine is sanding, the back end of the edger, and sometimes the back end of the washer is cutting into the machine. I don't think these guys know how to set any of this, and there's a lot of Dave Maboon has some good ones. Wayne Lee has some really great edger videos online.
Right, yeah.
You must see a lot of craziness.
I think you mentioned, the nickel and dime and the 3 pennies. That's, pretty much well known by any flooring guy, I thought.
Sure.
That's your starting point,
You would hope so, Tom.
That's your baseline, you can adjust it from there, left or right, or, to cut more aggressive or less aggressive. But I can remember, I don't remember how long I had been doing it, but I remember I changed a pad on my edger, and I could not, for the life of me, get it to not cut in the center. And, I messed with it for hours, but that was before I knew about dressing the pad. So a lot of these pads, brand new, when I go to put them on an edger and I do the 3 pennies or the nickel dime, and then I take it over to my test station to run it to see if it's going to bounce. A lot of times it's making contact in the middle of the edger pad immediately. So then I got to turn around and sand material out of the center of the pad.
Sure.
Because you only, Wayne Lee, like I said, he's got great videos. He explains, you want 3 rings,
3 rings
showing and all that, But I remember personally, 25, 30 years ago, me trying to put my own edger pad on there and just driving myself insane because no matter what it did, it just cut in the middle. Or I would have to jack the wheels up so much that it was digging on the nose, and it all has to do with, dressing that pad. Just because it's a brand new pad, it doesn't just go on and run right. Even if you don't change your wheels and you're just replacing the pad, it has to be dressed. That's one of the things I learned.
When you're dressing it out, I have something on my bench, but is there a particular grit? I've used 60, 80, 100. Is it better to go something really mild when you're dressing it out and cutting that extra rubber off there, like 100 or something?
I use 80.
That's what I
60 is a little
use.
too aggressive. I use basically like the PSA sheets for the square buffer.
Yep.
I have a piece of granite,
Yep.
and actually my granite's on a lift, so I have the paper glued to the granite on the lift, and then I raise the lift up to where I don't have to bend over to run the etcher. I did that for too many years. Now even when I'm dressed in a pad, I'm standing up.
Hey, let me ask you, go back to the big machine for a second. Sometimes you get like a Cobra 1, Cobra 2, get any machine. You can get the drum all balanced, the wheels all set to go, and maybe you dip the raw drum into 100 grit and shave off a little bit. Hummels have an elliptical shape, and I still have people say to me, "I don't care, I want you to dress it flat." And I'm like, well, the upper roller and the machine are supposed to be like this. If you ever run into that, I have guys that go, no, I want it flat.
No, I won't do it. I mean, that's
Right.
not how
it works.
Not how it's designed to operate. What I do is I got a shim I'll put under one wheel and dress one side of the drum, and then a shim on the other wheel and dress the other side of the drum to keep the factory taper.
Now that makes sense. Same thing. The upper roller on a Hummel is also tapered, like we say football shaped, right? It's tapered. Okay.
That's the myth that the guys think. Well, the Hummel drum is shaped like a football, so you can run it left to right or right to left. It doesn't matter. And the basics of that is any belt machine is, especially if you're doing new wood, is you want the sandpaper to be knocking the floor flat before that wheel is hitting, especially like the butt ends, on new wood. And that's what starts the wave. If you're running it the wrong way, if you turn the machine upside down, look at the placement of the wheels and where they line up with the drum of the sandpaper.
Right. Yeah.
The one wheel's outside of the drum and the other wheel's right behind the drum. So that's your lead wheel. The one that's right behind the drum is the direction you should be running.
Yeah,
But,
people debate that all the time. Is it?
Guys will argue that the Hummel can go either way. Yeah, it can go either way. It can go, anything you want to do, but it doesn't mean it's right.
Is that the old rule that still stands? You work, what is it, away from the motor?
It's probably 90%, the machines, the way they're designed is that the wheel on the left of the machine is not behind the sandpaper. The wheel on the right is directly behind the sandpaper. So you want to run from your left to your right. And that's probably 90% of the equipment out there is designed that way. It's just for balance.
You're right. Make it that right side,
make it wider. They move the one wheel out, to give it more, stability.
Sure. So the right side of most machines is where the flush wall is or the door is. You work towards that so that okay.
Correct.
I gotcha. Yeah.
And if you look at your Hummel manual when you buy it, it'll tell you which way to run it. And, most manufacturers will, in the paperwork, if you actually read it, it tells you and why to run it that way, not just, But yeah, you can run it either way.
I got every manual up to 1984.
I get guys, mine's set up to run the other way. Well, it's not right.
No, an edger maybe, but not a big machine. But look at all the old stuff. Yeah. I have every old manual ever, and they told us, front to the back of the room. Everybody I'm watching is doing 5 degrees, 7 degrees, 15 degrees cut. We didn't do that. It was front, back, front, back, front, back. But the floors, as they say today, are getting flatter and flatter and flatter. And we'll go to record.
I had an interesting job a couple years ago. I had done it 25 years ago. And this was, I don't know, probably 5 or 7 years ago itself. And I always thought that we do better work now than we did years ago, because of all the advancements in of equipment. And, it's been great that our industry has come up with, new machines and new advancements, because I felt like we were running Stone Age equipment with old patents, almost 50 years old, the split drums, and nothing's changed. But, there's been some advancements in the last 10 years that have been really good.
Sure.
Anyways, so we're doing a job. It's like 3,000 feet of flooring upstairs and downstairs, whole house. And I'm refinishing the house. The kids are grown up. The people are selling the house. We installed it and sanded it, like 25 years earlier. And I have a Legend. That's what I was running at the end of my career.
Yeah.
And I took a couple passes with the Legend, and it was just cleaning the floor up so evenly. The soft grain all the color was coming out of the soft grain. It was just cutting so nice. And usually if I'm cutting the floor, I can tell if it had a Hummel run on it before, because of guys take too large of passes and the shape of the drum. It isn't really getting the floor flat,
Right.
Especially some of the older floors and guys running them improperly. So I stopped and told my guys that worked for me at the time, and I was like, hey, I did this house like 25 years ago, and we did it with a split drum, 1B2, and 1700 HD floor maintainer buffer. No dust,
Clark,
we didn't have palm sanders. We didn't have, we had nothing back then. It was just 3 pieces of equipment I showed up with, and we did this whole house. Let's look around, see if you can find an edger dig or scratches or nail hole that isn't filled or anything, and we looked around, and I was actually really impressed how well that job looked, because I always just assumed that I do better work now than I did 25, 30 years ago. But what I feel is we do it a lot easier now. It wasn't, with all the advancements in the equipment and all that, I'm still doing the same quality of work. It's just a lot easier to do now with the planetary sanders and get that tabletop look. But that floor that we did 25 years ago looked like that. It just was a lot harder to do back then.
Yeah, we just sanded floors. Now I hear it all the time. People go, "Boy, we got that flat." I go, "Didn't we always get it flat?" No, not the way they're doing it. It's like a pool table now. And you know what? It does raise the expectations of the consumer. Now they want furniture quality flooring, and it is much closer to furniture quality flooring, I think.
But if you look at any LVT or ceramic that imitates wood, it's always got dish out.
Yeah,
that's what wood does.
Yeah.
Now we're sanding floors that look like Pergo or laminate.
Right. Art imitating life. Sorry, I'm going to go to the rotary machine, but skip 1 second. You know what machines get the crap kicked out of them? And I don't think they've come a long way yet, is the toe kick and under radiator sanders. Some of them look like, washing machine motors connected to an armature. Some of them have Makita motors. Some of them have Porta-Cable. Now they got DeWalt. I love them. They're dusty as hell, but they're getting there, huh? But these things get the crap kicked out of them.
Yeah, U.S. Sanders has an attachment for the Makita
and the
Makita looking one, yeah, and it actually works really good.
The AI machine
they're
makes
great
them.
machines, but they were the dustiest things ever. I mean, me and my uncle, when we started in the 80s, we couldn't afford a fancy toe kick edger, so I took a 7-inch grinder and put a rubber flex pad on it and put a piece of edger paper on that, and holy cow, you talk about dust! I tell you, rag around my face and destroy a house.
My favorite thing is on all those machines is they put that 7-inch fiber plate. You're always been thrilled about the rubber pad that goes on and everything. They kind of bounce around. That 7-inch fiber plate flexes out. You can get under a carved stone. You can get under tight places. You can get into a corner of a house and only leave, a 1/2-inch little clip in there. That thing, it throws dust like crazy, though.
Right. Yeah.
You got any tips for sanding in tight places like that? Like, you got any other sanders we should know about? Oh, like the new needle. We've sold a dozen of them.
Yeah. They're good little sanders.
Especially if you can sand a lot of spindles.
We did the flip with the spindle attachment or whatever, the corner attachment on the flip.
The flip, yeah.
And it just seemed like it spun too fast and would heat up, and then you'd go through the pads a lot. But it worked really good. What I've gotten into, right before I quit doing it, was all the Mercas. I personally wasn't, Fez tools are nice, but I had a guy bring out like 4 or 5 Fez tools on a job site and let me use them all, and they were really nice. But at the time, I'm like, I can't see spending $500 on a palm sander, but they are nice. And then I tested a Merca, and it did everything that I wanted it to and fit underneath the toe kicks. So we ran the Mercas, and then Merca came out with a 3-inch a few years ago, and that fit, between the spindles on the stairs. It fit in behind the toilet corners or whatever, wherever. I mean, that became a real, especially on aluminum oxide finish. We'd stick little 40 grits on the 3-inch Merca, and it would just, eat up those corners if the quarter round was off or the base was off, that you didn't have to scrape it, and it would do a good enough job getting that finish off. And then, you touch it up with a scraper real quick once you get through that hard finish.
This episode is brought to you by Odie's Oil. Developed by a wood flooring pro, no finish is more safe, durable, beautifying, and versatile, with lower cost and higher profit margin. Experience the pinnacle of finish with free on-site demos and training. Learn more at odiesoil.com. That's ODIES oil.com.
So switching away from the machines and getting towards some of the wrap up stuff is, you kind of reinvented your whole business. Tell me, don't you have an article coming up in Wood Floor Business in the December January issue?
Yeah, I got to get with Kim and do some final editing on it. But yeah, I got another one coming up, and it's basically about charging enough and charging what your time is worth, and that, and my experience of starting my business and worrying about what everybody else was charging instead of worrying about what do I need to charge. If I need to charge $35 a square foot, then I need to cut my overhead.
I know, right? What do you say? Everybody has their pitch. What do you do when you just got to push back on people? Like, come on, I deserve what I get paid. I'm not going to be I used to tell my customers, I am not the Kmart of flooring. And they'd get insulted and they'd say, well, I'm not. I'll give you 5 names of guys that are. Our reputation is really good work, and it costs me money to do that. How do you push back on that?
I would spend like an hour doing an estimate sometimes, if it was a big job, and I would go into detail what we're doing and what makes what I'm doing different than most of the guys out there, and, sometimes they would say, oh, we've had 3 estimates already and nobody mentioned this, nobody told us that, so basically just selling yourself. If you're going to charge a lot for your services, you got to sell that service. And you got to deliver on that service too. That's the thing, I was not the cheap guy out there. I was pretty expensive, but we had to do, the best quality work imaginable, and just the customer service. I was talking with a guy on the phone today, and we were mentioning, I was doing some high-end builder work, and if the builder called me to go do a touch-up, or somebody scratched the floor, the plumber scratched the floor or something like that, I never charged him for it. And he's like, oh, you can't do that. I'm like, for what he was charging, paying me, because he was paying me almost retail to do the work in the beginning. And that was part of the service. If there was a touch up, I just went and did it. I'm not going to argue about it and nickel and dime him, because he never complained about what I thought, was my price. He never, again, he never questioned it and just knew that the quality was worth it. And I had guys tell me, why, my buddy, he's building houses and his guy's doing it for like $5 less than you, but I know he has nothing but problems.
Right. So do you think that TNT machine it just happened, or is this something like now you're like, I think I'm going to build this into something? Is it a legacy? You got so much longevity in the industry and you've learned so many lessons. You think you're just going to keep cruising on through with this? Is it something you're going to hand to somebody? You're going to build for just yourself? What are you going to do with TNT machine?
I go back and forth, because as busy as I am right now, yeah, I could hire a couple guys and train them. And, this is the first time in 35 years I haven't had any employees, and I love it.
Yeah.
The employees aren't like they used to be. It seems like it's hard to get a good one now. I've had a lot of good guys over the years, but it just seems like it gets harder and harder to find those good guys anymore. And to be able to pay them enough to keep them happy and keep them around and still the company make money. That's, it's rough. It really is.
Isn't it? I had a guy this morning. He was our first driver, and he worked about 2.5 hours and texted that he quit. And he apologized and said, kid, that's not even the record. The record is 45 minutes. I said, I've sat people down in interviews and said, listen, if you were my son, I would tell you, don't take this job. Moving, we'll have to have a whole seminar on moving hardwood floor. We still throw it on our shoulder as a distributor and deliver it.
Right.
It's not worth it. It's just the craziest job. They need to invent something robotic to do it. And yet it's the only way we can move flooring sometime. And then competitors start to do this. So it starts off right in the early years, moving wood on your shoulder, moving all your equipment, carrying a buffer upstairs. And like you said, you get to a point in your life, you go, I just don't think I can. My pride can do it. Can I physically do it without harming myself? It gets pretty risky, doesn't it?
Yeah. So I consider myself semi-retired right now, but I'm only 56 years old.
Yep.
So it's a long time for my insurance to, cover insurance. So this is kind of doing the equipment's going to pay for my insurance for the next decade or so. That's about how I look at it. I could retire right now,
right,
financially, but the damn insurance is, so much. It's just ridiculous.
But what do you do when we have customers come in here? I've been doing this forever, and the 22, 23-year-olds come in. I don't say it. I'm like, okay, they're going to get paid well. They're going to work well. They like doing what they do, but it's not plumbing or electrical. You got dust, you got fumes, you got chemicals. What do we tell a 22-year-old that wants to get into floor sanding?
I talk to a lot of guys that come through here, and I ask them questions and try to give them advice that I didn't have when I was younger. A lot of times I'm asking, what are you putting away towards retirement? And they're like, oh, I haven't started doing that yet. How many years have you been in business? Oh, 5 years. And I'm like, if I would have started sooner, I wouldn't have been doing it as long either, And I try to use my poor experiences to help these guys. Not that they're going to listen, but hopefully one or two of them actually do. I didn't listen to nobody when I was younger either.
No,
but I really push, putting money away. Some of the stuff, I was talking with Kim with the other article is once you get your business to the point where you have business checking account with a balance in it all the time, because, I ran my business for years and thought I was doing really good, but I was lucky at the end of the month if I had, $50 in the account after everybody was paid, Once I got to that point where, I had 20 grand or more in the bank all the time, I didn't need this check to pay this guy or to do this, to do that. I could operate. And then when I was out doing estimates, I didn't need that job to make my car payment or make my mortgage payment or pay my employer or employees or pay, the material bill. You start bidding them differently too, because you're like, well, this one's gonna be a pain in the ass. This customer's a pain in the ass. I don't want this job. So you just bid it high. And then you turn around and get the job. So it's like, wow, how much money have I been leaving on the table all the time? And you start looking at things differently. And that's when my business changed for me personally, is once I had cushion in the bank, operating money, and not touching it, just leaving it there. Only touch it when you're waiting on one check and you have to hit into it, but then that check count comes, and it's hard to discipline to do that. But once you do that, everything changes. I mean, just the day to day, you're not as grouchy, you're not as stressed out. It really changes the way you run your business, I think, for us small business owners, because a lot of these guys, they're running from check to check. And, I know a lot of these guys over the years, they get a deposit on a job, and then the last day of the job, they're asking the customer for another couple $100 so they could go buy finish, so they could finish the job. And it's like, holy cow. I mean, that's horrible.
Yeah, it's an old rule of thumb: is your business running you, or are you running your business? I know a lot of people that businesses. Everybody thinks
you're an employee, of yourself. I mean, you're not a business owner.
Everybody thinks you get it made. Oh, they own a business; they're rich. I could give you 100 people that own businesses. I'll be glad to hand it to you. It's just, you want, it's not the money and all the other stuff you want from it's the freedom. It's the freedom to make your decisions and do what you were born to do and have that crap. I find you probably get this too. I'm running a new distribution center. I've been doing this forever, and I can't wait to become the guy that just fixes the tools here. I don't need to be top of the food chain. I do it most times. I go out in the warehouse. Guys bring in stuff. I go, I'll fix it for you. I love it. I can fix tools all day long.
Well, that's what I like about it. My shop's on my property at home. I come out here, I blast my stereo, and put my phone on a charger, and I just work on equipment. It's just, and for me, personally, is I moved out of the Chicago area, but still all my work was in there. It was, the trade-off is, I got a nice little home in the country and, a little bit of land, but I mean, I was spending 3 hours or more a day driving every day for over 20 years. I mean, it was just crazy. If I look at, I probably spent, 6 of them years, or whatever, just behind the wheel of a vehicle.
Right.
So now I get up and I, spend time out in the yard with my dogs. I feed the birds. I still only get to the shop by 9:00, but I'm up at 5:30, and by the time I, hit the shop, it's 9:00. And I work from 9 to 5, and I don't care if I'm working on a piece of equipment and got 10 minutes to finish it off. It comes 5:00, I clock out and I go walk back up to the house. It'll be here tomorrow. I used to work, floors till 10, 11, 12, 1, 2 in the morning sometimes to get them done, get a coat on it or whatever. And I just, did that for most of my career. Now I don't. Tomorrow's another day, it'll get done.
What we got to do is we should do something where we get to take individual tools and break them down, because I'm so fascinated. Even when they come across the bench and you go, look at it, tells its own story. Like, where did this thing come from that it's half caught fire, half running? It's got stickers on it. They put stickers on it that cover the vents of the fan. Just crazy crap.
I got a picture of a buffer the cord's 3 different colors. There's probably 4 different colors of tape holding the 3 different colors of cord together.
Oh, Lord.
And I'm just like, well, I understand, it acted up and, you're in the middle of trying to finish a job, but you take it home and you work on it and fix it before the next job. But no, that fix is good for another 6 months or a year or who knows how long or a week. And then they, it breaks down again and they just bubble gum it back together again, and worst comes worst, you go buy a good extension cord, 12 gauge, 3-wire cord and just wire it into the buffer, and put a new cord on it. It might not be the original one, but just make sure you go with a good heavy, gauge cord and you'll be fine. It'd be better than a fire hazard. And
Oh, that's my thing. I get cord is expensive, $4 or $5 a foot.
Yeah.
But you know what I do is if you go into the Home Depot or Lowe's aisle, you can go right in that same aisle where they sell industrial cords for generators and things. You can get just the right wire. It already has the plug, and some of them light up, and that's probably $70 for a 50 and $110. So instead of $400, I take that, I cut the end off, wire that into the machine, and they're non-marking.
Do you know what a cord for an RS-16 buffer costs from American Sanders?
I won't buy it.
$360 something.
Those guys are great because they'll go, do you want me to just make you one or do you want ours?
I'm like, there's no way I could bill a customer $350 for a cord.
Yeah.
Or an edger cord is like, $240 or something retail, So yeah, I mean, I buy the cord by the foot, usually on a spool, and make my own. Or like you said, there's times where I got a lot of vacuums that a big commercial company uses, and OSHA's been cutting the cords off them on them because they're 2-prong cords.
Yes.
The vacuum is all plastic. It's not grounded. It doesn't need to be grounded. There's nothing to ground it to.
It means it's double insulated.
Right. But OSHA, because everything's got to have a ground on it. So what I'm doing is I'm putting 3-prong cords, and the vacuum cords, again, they were like $170 for a cord for a vacuum. So I just buy the Yellow Jacket, a good quality cord. I'll buy a good Yellow Jacket cord for $75 and cut the one end off and crimp on some connectors. And like you said, it lights up when you plug it in.
Yep.
And all
Looks
that.
Great. Makes me look like a champ.
3 prongs. It's got 3 prongs on it. So,
well, listen, Tom Wimberly, TNT Machine. Let's do the quick fire questions. And we'll go from there, and then we can wrap it up, and I'll let you roll. I told you, I could talk machines forever. It's my favorite subject. I'm sorry. It's my thing, but I'll throw some quick fire questions at you. You answer them as quick and as fast as you can. You don't have to elaborate. Are you ready to roll?
Sure.
All right. Number one, what's the oldest machine you have running in your shop?
The oldest machine I have running in my shop?
Yeah, or you've seen.
Oh, that I've worked on?
Yep.
Some edgers that are the single speed B2s. And I got some really early edgers, like the Clark edgers, and actually Portacable made edgers, way back then too. I've got a few of them. Most of them are on display now. They do run and everything, but they're on display, and I got some buffers that the motors are sideways on the tops, and they're from like the 30s or 40s. I got some cool old stuff. But most of it came here, and I bought it off of people and, sold them something that can work better for what they want it for.
Well, since this is, all right, I'm going to give you two-parter on this one because you do both flooring and repair equipment. I always ask people, what's their favorite tool as a floor pro? But give me that one, and then what's your favorite tool in your tool repair shop?
Favorite tool? I mean, I never minded scraping, so
everybody's
my favorite tool is my scraper. It was handmade, and I've had it since I was 15.
What's your favorite tool in your repair shop?
My arbor press. It is awesome. I did automotive, so I had a 20-ton hydraulic, air over hydraulic press. When you're pressing bearings into aluminum housings, just having a nice arbor press, it's like a 2.5 ton. You can feel that bearing go in. You can, you got a feel to the lever. Yeah. But the other one, you're hitting a button and it's going in no matter what.
Yeah, that's your ride or die. Yeah, I've messed with bearings. Yeah. If you don't have a press, you're not doing it right.
Yeah.
So whether it was in the field or on your shop, or whether you sucked it up with what's the weirdest thing you ever sucked up with a vacuum or fell out of a machine? Anything?
Oh God. The one yesterday was a screw in the fan of a Hummel.
Ooh.
It locked the fan up. It didn't do any damage. It didn't take out a blade or nothing. A lot of screws. That's what I find in the fan assemblies on a lot of big machines is screws that aren't from the machine either. They were sucked up off the floor because guys don't take the time to sweep the floor before they start sanding. Yeah. And a lot of plastic and edgers. You always see that.
Yeah, we always ask people, if you weren't doing floors, what would you be doing? But you'd probably be fixing machines. So if you weren't doing floors and fixing machines, what do you think you would have been doing?
As a kid, I wanted to be a chef. My grandfather had a restaurant, and I started working in a restaurant when I was like 10, 12 years old, cooking and stuff. And that was the career path I was going to go on. But then, drugs and alcohol and
all the fun stuff. I gave up drinking because I wanted to donate my liver to science fiction. It's like, we're good. Flooring will do that to you. What's one thing that every floor pro should do every day, but they never seem to get it done?
Blow out their equipment.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, that's just, I can't stress that enough.
Tom Wimberly, do you have carpet in your home?
No.
God bless you.
But I joke around because I don't do floors anymore, and I did floors for 40 years. Everybody knows me. I'm a floor guy, and they can't believe it. My wife's shocked. I sold my trailer. I sold all my equipment, right away. I don't want to do it anymore. And I joke around with guys and said, yeah, my next house, I'm putting in wall-to-wall carpet. And they're like, oh, yeah, right. But, I just got that burnt out on it. I love what I do because I'm still in the industry. I'm still talking to guys, still talking about floors, still, and all that. I love all that. But I have no ambition to sand a floor ever again in my life.
Yeah.
I did it every day for 40 years. I mean, it just, I'm done.
Yeah.
And part of that's my own fault because in my business, I should have had employees, out on their own and me just, doing the paperwork and stuff. But I sold my business and I sold me as the face, and for what I was charging, I had to be on the job, and that was the difference. I would only go out and, run the drum and do the final coat, and be there on stain day, but I was there. The customer was, they wanted to see me.
It's funny, I had somebody say to me the other day, they're from Rhode Island, and they go, you don't understand, Rhode Island's so small, and in the 70s, we carpeted the whole place. Like, oh, really? It's that small. Your last question, your final question is, so who, in the Lifetime movie about you as a floor pro and a floor mechanic, who plays you in that Lifetime role?
Gary Busey.
Hey, there you go. That is all I got for you. Listen, what we got to do is you got to recap everything. But you do have your magazine article that's coming up in Wood Floor Business in the December-January issue. What did we learn today, Tom? We learned keep belts tight, vacuum all your stuff, and keep your ears open at all times. See, I paid attention. I'm listening. I told you we'd learn stuff from you. This is great. Listen, I really, really, really appreciate you hanging out with me. I love talking tools. Flooring's great and everything, but if your machines aren't running right, you're toast. So everything you just brought to the table, I think people are going to be extremely fascinated with.
I'm always here to answer questions, and my knowledge is not that great sometimes, but got lots of experience.
Listen, thank you very much. I really appreciate it, and hopefully you and I will talk again soon.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks to Tom Wimberly for sharing his wood flooring wisdom on all things wood floor. You can find links to his articles in Wood Floor Business in the show notes for this episode. And thanks to this season's sponsor of all things wood floor, Odie's Oil, the wood floor finish that is safe and beautiful while delivering a lower cost and higher profit margin. If you liked this episode, please rate and review All Things Wood Floor, and don't forget to subscribe.